My name is Bob Liff, and this is the CUNY Forum, a town meeting that brings prominent New Yorkers together with faculty and students at the Edward T. Rogowski Internship Program in Government and Public Affairs. New Yorkers go to the polls this year, starting with party primaries in June, in municipal elections where promises are being discussed under the shadow of a presidential administration led by a native New Yorker that seems hell-bent on undercutting the kind of federal support we have long relied on and paid into with our taxes to keep a roof over our head, trains to ride to work, and food to sustain us. The targets of those federal cutbacks are breathtaking. Home heating assistance, rent vouchers, transit maintenance, climate change amelioration, Medicaid services, health research, infrastructure investments, and a wide gamut of assistance and support to legal and undocumented immigrants alike are just some of the services facing large cutbacks. And in a city based on tolerance, where there are no first-class subway cars, and we're all thrown together on our daily commutes, that very tolerance that gets us from today to tomorrow is in the crosshairs of Donald Trump's administration that, frankly, is trying to restore some mythical 1950s America in which white people, more specifically white men, were at the center of power and culture. It's telling that as Trump dispatches teams of ICE agents to pick up legal residents, and in some cases citizens, as part of his attack on sanctuary cities like New York, the one group he has offered a potential immigration welcome mat to is white Afrikaner farmers in South Africa. Is that subtle enough? We're joined by four New Yorkers who watch how the developments in Washington impact our daily lives in New York City as a mayoral race plays out. Carolyn Maloney served 30 years in Congress from a Manhattan-based district and now heads the ERA Coalition. Edward Poteat is an adjunct professor of affordable housing finance at Columbia University and the president of Carthage Advisors, a developer of affordable housing, including the recently opened Marcus Garvey Village in Harlem. Juan Manuel Benitez is a professor in Columbia School of Journalism and a former reporter and anchor for New York One. And Harry Siegel is a daily news columnist and editor at TheCITY.nyc, which if you do not read it every day to find out what's going on, you should. Harry will tell us what it all means. Carolyn, let me start with you. You and I know each other for a long time. We've watched civic affairs. You've been in Washington, you've been in the city council. Have you ever seen a situation like this where the federal government is either abandoning or attacking the city and everything we stand for and need?
I have never seen anything like that in modern history or ever. It's almost unbelievable, but fortunately we have a strong governor and AG that are standing up in some states like Maine and Massachusetts and New York and California. But have you noticed the flurry of executive orders? It always makes me dizzy, but he hasn't signed one bill into law in his first 100 years. Or
100 days.
Yeah, 100 days.
Seems like 100
And he's
days.
overriding the will of Congress and of the courts. And since we're at a CUNY Forum, the educational system and the innovation coming out of the research in our educational institutions is the envy of the world, and he's set to destroy it. I can tell you that practically 100% of original research is funded by the federal government and then spun off into the private sector when something looks real. And the whole system works very well. That's it's been part of our economic security and certainly the innovation that has made this country so great. And it is terrible to see, sickening.
Ed, you wrote an op-ed in the Daily News recently talking about Marcus Garvey Village, in which you were able to use the market rate housing to pay for the bonds that were to cover the affordable units. It's a 50% affordable, unlike a lot of developments, and the affordability is not at 80%; it's at 50%. You rely on federal funding. You had a significant amount of subsidy in the development, and the tenants rely on rent vouchers. They're under attack. What does this tell you about the ability to finance your bonds and about developing affordable housing?
Yeah, you have what I would say is a perfect storm. You have a situation where rents before Trump came into office were going up anyway, right, because of decisions we made previously. On top of that, if you're cutting vouchers now, that means the lowest income New Yorkers won't be able to afford anything. NYCHA has a waiting list that's years long. Section 8, before Trump started making cuts, has a waiting list that's years long. So now with these cuts, our homeless problem, which wasn't not crazy before, will now be much worse. So I think you really have a perfect storm happening, and I'm not sure what the way out is except seeing more homelessness and more issues coming from homelessness before things get better.
Juan Manuel, you're at Columbia. I still see you as a New York One guy. Columbia has kind of been one of the epicenters of the attacks on higher education. You see that they're attacking the tax-exempt status of Harvard University now. You've been cycling through presidents, as frequently as the mayor cycles through police commissioners, and
even faster.
And there's been a significant attack on independent journalism. So on both of those, have you felt the impact of that at the J School? Have your students felt that?
Of course. Listen, this country is an economic power all over the world, a leading innovator because of our top universities. And now what we're saying to our international students is like, you might not get a visa to study at Columbia University. You might not get that funding to do the research that you wanted to do, and that America was the only place that was going to be able to afford you doing that research. So we are noticing that already. We know we have students already, international students in my class. Some of them, they're afraid of touching some stories, covering some stories because they don't want their bylines to appear in some search by the State Department. So it's a really hard, it's a very difficult environment to teach, to lead, to mentor the new reporters, because they know that someone is watching and they can just lose their visa or any kind of job opportunities that they were aspiring to get once they graduate. So it's really, really worrisome.
I want to come back to that in a bit, because you also have a significant decline in the number of foreign students applying to American universities, precisely because of this. Harry, politics never ends. For whatever's going on in Washington, we're going through a mayor's race, and we have a front runner in Andrew Cuomo, who seems to be, tiptoeing around the Trump question, while we have a mayor who is deeply compromised by his agreement that led to the drop of federal charges against him, and is now running as an independent. How has the Trump factor played into mayoral election?
Deeply insufficiently. What we're having is a circumstance where, as Ed was saying, we're going to have a lot less. And at the end of this, if Democrats run the table and we still have elections and the results are honored and all that, a lot of the money that could come back would not be reliable in the same ways. And so you're talking about a city that's going to have to start thinking about what it can do with less and what it can do better. And we got through 9/11, 2008, Sandy, COVID, without really having to reckon with that for a bunch of reasons. And it's happening right now, and you really wouldn't know it from nearly any of the candidates in the mayor's race. A few of them have started speaking seriously about what they would do to counter Trump. Lander says he put $1 billion in a reserve. There's a bunch of things floating around there.
The governor is talking about increasing the reserves for exactly that reason.
None of them are sufficient to this moment. The governor is not actually running a campaign. Let me be blunt. He is collecting organized labor support, and he's showing up at black churches.
I'm talking about Governor Hochul. I don't mean Governor.
Yes. But you brought up Governor Cuomo before.
Yes.
So I was going back to him for a minute because I'm upset by this. As a member of the public, a New Yorker, and a member of the press, I understand tactically why he's doing this. It's a crowded race. It's hard to think fully about it. If people rank him at all, he's going to win. He has so much built-up name recognition. But he's not speaking to any of this. He has a long, very fraught, complicated relationship with Trump, who I believe was his legal client at one point when he hung out, when his dad was governor, and he possibly corruptly hung out his own shingle. and was doing legal work. I remember. But the question with all these guys, Adams is compromised, and the other candidates sort of want to just talk about him. This guy's compromised. What Trump's doing is this immense pressure campaign on all these institutions, on higher ed, right, which we've talked about, on real estate in a bunch of ways. He's taken over Penn Station redevelopment, and on the whole political class. So are they going to investigate Letitia James? Are they going to investigate Eric Adams? Or are they going to let Eric Adams off? Are they going to go after Andrew Cuomo? And this will continue with whoever wins this election. And I don't think we're seriously prepared for this moment, or the conversation the candidates are having, or just thinking about winning, is really lined up with the moment we're at, and that's distressing.
You know, 80% of the federal support that we do get goes to schools, homeless services, HPD, social services, and there's one other department that I'm not remembering at the moment.
Health.
And you know, and a lot of that money flows through the state. The state actually gets a lot larger percentage of its budget from the federal government than the city does, but a lot of that state money flows down. You fought for a lot of that money, and I also want to get into the tariff question, but I don't want to deal with that right now. So I mean, you look at cutbacks affecting your old district, affecting the entire city.
Oh, the cutbacks are terrible, and one of the things that I passed when I was the chair of the oversight committee is that money would go directly to the city and not flow through the state, because the state then takes the city money and it doesn't get where it's supposed to go. But the tariffs are going to increase the cost of living, and you combine that with the vouchers and the cutbacks in personnel, and it's devastating. But a lot of it, he's trying. I literally feel dizzy, because he'll make one statement and then he'll turn it around the next day and then say something else the next day, and so it's not clear where you stand. I mean, the tariffs seem to. He says in 11 days he's going to negotiate with 50 different countries and get this all settled. And I mean, it's really, I don't know how to describe it, but it's saying that it's dizzy. But the cuts are real, they're strong, they're deep, and it's going to hurt the city tremendously. But the city will bounce back, I'm sure.
You know, Ed, you also have a real-world implication of building, tariffs. If you're putting tariffs on aluminum, you're putting tariffs on steel, much of which we get from outside the borders of, the borders of the United States. That's going to affect your attempt to continue building. I mean, we are the center of the world economy, and so the idea of tariffs, the global economy is a local New York story, and. Am I being overly? No,
not at all.
Overly dramatic?
Not at all. It's even worse than the tariffs, because luckily most building materials don't come from China. So if Trump follows through on what he's saying, it'll be a 10% tariff that may go away soon, except for China. What's worse is the immigration push, right? And so much of our labor force are newly arrived immigrants that may or may not be legal at times. That's going to drive up cost to then build, because labor makes up 30% of our cost. And so you have a city where affordability is an issue, and now builders are going to be building buildings that are even more expensive, need higher rents. And even on the affordability front, the city's going to have to subsidize those units even more because costs are going up. So you have a situation where funding's being cut, costs are going up. Again, as I said before, it's a perfect storm where we'll just produce less affordable housing in a city that needs more of it.
I mean, are tariffs an esoteric issue, or are you guys?
Say something, Bob, because
Sure.
just to go with that,
Please.
because I don't think Ed would be able to build those two towers in Harlem right now, those two residential towers today, with the same kind of labor that you did. I mean, I know that those two buildings really, really well, not only because I live next door, but also because I had students last year covering some of the immigration concerns that some of the construction workers and the people, the economy around them on that street that they had. And I don't think now, with all the fear in the immigrant community, you'd be able to accomplish or to get like all those construction workers in one site that now are scared that ICE is going to show up and is going to deport them all.
Yeah, I mean, you have vendors and you have subcontractors, guys that work for us, who are saying that their men, mostly men, are not showing up, just are not coming to work because they're afraid of ICE coming and doing raids at the job site. Again, I mean, I don't want to be negative Nancy here. We should find something good here. I just can't find it. Maybe someone else can. So.
But the immigration attack, which is profoundly important in the city, is profoundly important at CUNY, where you have 6,000, whatever the number is, undocumented students who are eligible for an education like anybody else is in this city. It's it's partly a spiritual attack on what the city is, but there are real world economic impacts.
Immediate. This is a profound attack on what New York City is. And New York is a port city, is a city of immigrants, is a place where people can build things. And the real questions about this going forward and maintaining the sanctuary city status or protections or whatever you like we have is going to be really fraught and complicated. This gets treated like a headline thing or a sort of spiritual idea, but it's sort of specific places where we're not cooperating with federal immigration enforcement. And up till now, the feds have responded to that with some detachment. We now have a border czar who, by the way, doesn't have an actual title, right? That's not just his nickname, it's his only thing. Trump just said, this guy's the border czar. It says, look, if you're not cooperating, Chicago, New York, we're just coming in. And so, we have an ID card just in the city. I have one, but you can get to libraries and museums. And so people who are here can identify themselves. You have people who are paying taxes, and they're using IRS data now to target people who they say are not here legally, and sometimes in fraud or possibly incorrect ways.
They're actually yanking legal status from people that they don't like, people who are here with green cards, and they're saying, we're going to yank your green card.
There's so much going on. There's yanking green cards. There's taking away temporary protected status. There's people who applied through a Biden app that they've taken away, and they say, well, now you can't be anymore, and you got 30, 60 days, get out of the country, self-deport. And all this is an attempt to shift what's lawful and to actually take local control and forget about any principles of federalism and places being able to determine for themselves what works in their place in their economy. And this is congestion pricing too, by the way, which is otherwise a separate issue, and say, no, we're going to tell you how it works now and what we can do. And it's terrible. It's creating tons of fear and uncertainty. And really the worst part is, again, if we get through this and we have elections and everything else, there's just no promise that this won't happen again. Like the things that are being shattered are not going to be Humpty Dumpty easily put back together. And it's time to start thinking seriously about what our core services are, who we have an essential honor and obligation to protect, and what that means. And all this comes down to, last thing, something you brought up in your excellent intro, and then something you brought up, which is tolerance, small t, and affordability. And when things become more expensive and grinding in this city, when there's less support, that scrapes against tolerance, and in ways that get propagandized and manipulated, end up on the front page of the Post, and then in creepy executive orders, and in fact, harming the city then becomes the rationale for further harming and trying to dominate the city, is my fear. Not to be whoever's worse than negative Nancy, like Doom Dolores.
Carolyn, the city had a very interesting story this week about, I think it was Maldonado had the story about not-for-profit groups, non-governmental organizations, NGOs, which are not only seeing the threats of huge cutbacks, but are actually seeing the threat of losing their tax-exempt status, just the way Harvard, the tax-exempt status for Harvard is under attack. You understand tax law a lot better than I do. Why is that significant? What does it mean?
I would say the not-for-profit sector is literally terrified. Most of them, or many of them, focused on underserved communities and helping people who need help, like immigrants and people that are challenged economically, and they've always been diverse. And they are rewriting their whole program on diversity. A lot of their funders are going away from them because they're afraid of the Trump people coming after them. and they are rewriting the ways they appeal for financial support. It's all supported, as you know, from independent expenditures for them, and it's had a profound effect. They are really taking any mention of diversity and equality and inclusion out of their arguments, and they're changing their focus, and they are afraid of losing their tax-exempt status and their funding, and they have seen a drop in funding. Actually, I was on a board meeting with a not-for-profit right before coming here, and they were talking about losing money and being told that their focus on diversity has now got to be removed, or they won't be continued funded by certain people, and it's really having a deep and strong, profound impact on the not-for-profit community especially, which is a fragile community to begin with. So it's really having a negative, hopefully not lasting impact. We have midterm elections coming up, and we need the Democrats to win the midterm elections. We're hoping that we can regain the House and have somewhat of a check. But we also are going to have to be focusing and have the press focusing on fair elections and preserving our elections and oversight of our elections. Part of it is so much is coming in so many areas that my friends in the press say they can't even cover it because they get one outlandish attack, and then they wake up in the middle of the night and there's two more, and then they wake up in the morning and there's three more attacks on things that we care about and are analyzing or trying to analyze the impact on it.
Well, you know, Ed, since you rely on people buying bonds, and you were, you're a Harlem boy. You were raised in Schaumburg Plaza.
Raised in Harlem.
Is that correct? And to the degree that the Trump administration is saying, if you want to maintain, and they haven't been this explicit yet, but they've clearly been sending signals that if you continue to push a DEI agenda, a diversity, equity, and inclusion agenda, your tax-exempt status. Now, are your bonds tax-exempt, the ones that you are selling?
The bonds are tax-exempt, but I don't think they would pull them. I mean, I don't know. I don't think they would pull them because we're in MWBE. But Carolyn, I am.
Well, but the very fact you're an NWBE, a minority women business-owned enterprise, I don't think they've explicitly gone after those yet.
Yet.
Right.
No, but they have, right? Because they are, I sit on the board too, and it receives federal funding. And I won't name them because they're afraid.
Yeah.
They're afraid.
I respect that.
And I was, as a board member, saying, no, we should fight the fact that what they're doing is mailing letters out and saying, please certify that on your board there's no DEI initiatives that you're doing before we then continue giving you federal funds. I fought as a board member, and I won't name the board, but my board members were like, we're scared because we need these funds to keep going, and we're going to sign this. And we'll change and figure it out. But yeah, we're going to eliminate any DEI initiatives on paper that we have because we're just scared.
That's what I'm hearing from every not-for-profit.
Yeah, it is a real thing.
You know, TheCITY.nyc is a not-for-profit.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, a lot of media is not-for-profit, but not legally. The city is legally a not-for-profit. I don't want to, get you into a business. I mean, I do, but I'm not going to push you into a business discussion. Is this a concern?
What do I know? I'm just a cranky, ink-stained wretch there. But let me just say.
Well, there's actually electrons. It's not so much ink anymore, but go ahead.
Let's talk about Trump and the lawyers for a second. I'm going to bring this right back. He's demanding law firms, including significant ones here, basically roll over individually, right? So there's a thing in America, it's really constitutional, where you don't pass laws that target individual people or things. Trump hasn't passed any laws.
That's a bill of attainder. Yes.
But he's governing through executive orders. He's targeting his enemies, real and perceived, and he's demanding compliance all around and advanced compliance. So what is the DEI, radical Marxist ideology stuff he's after? No one really knows. He hasn't actually defined it. You're just supposed to figure it out in advance so you don't end up being the one who gets whacked. And that's the threat and the coercion. I would just say that shout out to corrupt Mayor Eric Adams, right? That there was a whole thing with people bribing him that the DA, Alvin Bragg, sort of was forced into because he was investigating a series of firms that were getting MWB contracts for a whole series of other frauds, and they were putting together straw donations for the mayor. One of these firms had a guy who volunteered to lead the firm so that it qualified, who'd previously gone to prison for shooting someone in the foot. Like, these are sort of ridiculous, shady characters. And I bring this up to say that Trump is a talk radio president. You know, you got to hustle down every time. You just sort of rave about things and say the world ought to be that way, but with tremendous powers. And particularly in this forum, and with a CUNY audience in mind, I just want to observe that there are problems with some of the things he's targeting that there's obviously political support for, and he keeps hiding behind that. With his immigrant roundups, where they're not putting out numbers, but reporters have found that most of these people are not criminals in any sense. You know, that they're incidental and they're rounded up in the course, and rounded up is the word of these things. They say they're targeting the worst of the worst, and every really bad guy they get goes straight to the post. This guy who did a terrible thing, he's out of the country. You know, do you liberal swine really want that sort of person around, you know, and around your children and your family? That part of the appeal relates to some of the ways in which New York has not always, and places like New York, cleaned up their own houses and handled their own business, and the result is we have this brutalist, I think, really unthinking regime that's taken aim at us. And the bottom line there does seem to be that the bottom line is going to be less and less consistent and not easily restored. So I'm really worried about that. And with the nonprofits, right, a lot of them are proto-governmental, and the right has that as a conspiracy. But frequently that means that they're doing work on behalf of a society, right? Politics is just allocating our common goods. Like, okay, we are going to try and house the poor, and we're going to feed the needy, and we're going to watch out for orphans. I mean, literally, and you have groups and people who are scrambling to do this, and suddenly their money's uncertain. The people who give them money are like, not only is this still going to be tax deductible, is this going to get me targeted by the administration if they see me in opposition to this? And that's all distressing. I hope none of it comes for the city, and we just quietly handle our business, and none of this matters. But I wonder, with Trump's fixation with the news industry, with his constantly just looking for levers to sort of get people to conform and fall into line, what pressures may be coming.
I just think that everything is so shocking because you can be a Republican, you can be a Democrat, you can be for many of the things that Donald Trump believes in. But at the same time, you have a president right now that is shooting himself in the foot by attacking, like those institutions are supposed to be making America great. Like the economy, right? Why is he doing all this tariff stuff when you see the financial sector now going through a hard time? Why do you do these immigration roundups when you know that you need some of this work to be able to build enough housing to house Americans? Why are you going against the immigrant communities when you want public safety? And now those immigrants in many communities are going to be scared of going to the police because they don't want to be deported, or they don't want their families or their neighbors to be deported.
They don't want any record of their existence.
Right.
Yeah.
They're going to, crime rates are going to go up because the police, police officers are not going to have a direct relationship with those communities. The same with higher education. That's basically soft power for the United States. You're destroying the State Department already, and now you're attacking those institutions that are making America what America is around the world. So I just don't know what the strategy here is. If you really want to win, this is a really weird way to go about it.
But I mean, also, if I can interject, that to be clear, Trump doesn't have a strategy, right? He never had. You know, if you go back to the 90s, he bankrupted casinos. he had a real estate empire that his daddy gave him, and he lost all of that, right? Whatever money Trump had came when his dad gave it to him a second time. It said, whatever you do, don't sell the real estate that I'm giving you. His dad dies immediately, he sells, and him and his siblings sell all the real estate that his dad gave him. He's a good marketer. And so he's not really doing this for strategy, he's doing this for eyeballs, for likes. But it's a horrible way to govern a country, being a marketer, but he's not a businessman, never really has been.
Talking about the world, about the global economy again, because it is a New York City local story. The idea of soft power, the opposite of welcoming the world as an example of American soft power is the isolationism, is the withdrawing from the world that we've essentially seen in the entire MAGA movement. Is that a fair?
It's a very troubling, especially with Ukraine. I hope that the country stands strong with Ukraine and with President Zelensky. It's it's really painful to watch. And our Defense Department, you know, he's communicating on unsecure lines, on movements of our troops. And the committee I used to chair, the Government for Reform and Oversight, they should be having hearings on that right now. Why are they not securing? Why are they allowing him to communicate on unsecure lines on national security matters? That's threatening to our country.
But the other thing they're doing in the Defense Department, to come back to the tolerance question, is totally focused on DEI. It's not only gay troops. It's not only trans troops. It's also women's troops. I mean, they're yanking the history out of the history of women, the history of African Americans.
It's outrageous. It's outrageous. Rewriting the history, taking the Tuskegee warfares and the waves that women who fought and supported the military and World War II. That's why we need the National Women's Museum that I passed. I'll tell you one thing Trump did, which is very interesting. I passed this bill to create a National Women's Museum on the Mall, just for what you're saying, so that the history's preserved about women and you can't erase it like he tried to do. And it finally passed, and then they took off it being on the mall. Women were not permitted on the wall. So now we have a bill to put women back on the mall. He has come out in support of it. That's the one thing I have common ground with him. He has come out. Let's see if he changes his mind. I hope he doesn't. But it's a good
he's also
thing.
trying to, I'm going to use the word sanitize, and I'm only using the word sanitize in the sense of how he views the world. Even the National African American Museum. So, I'm surprised he allows black people to
Well, he seems to be taking a lot of targets, but the one target he hasn't touched is the military. Everybody's been cut but the military, and it is now at $860 billion. And he added for the 2026 budget, it's up to $1 trillion. So he added money to the military. So we are ready for the next war if we knew who the enemy was. It's an outrageous expenditure of money. No look at the contracts. Are they competitively bid? Are they actually producing what they're supposed to produce? No oversight, no dodge, just more money.
Well, Pogo, the philosophical possum in the comic, said that we have met the enemy and he is us. Yes, tell us your name and your campus, please.
Hi, my name is Taranum Rahman. I am from CUNY City College. And my question was based around just what we see today and how can we compare this to the Red Scare that happened in the 1950s? And what are some things as young activists that we can do that we weren't able to do back in the day?
I think Harry would probably say, I'm going to speak for him, that the link to the Red Scares is Roy Cohn. Explain that.
Roy Cohn was
Speak here.
quite a character. He was an attorney, a gossip column source for many years, and someone beloved by the journalist newspaper class. As such, a fixer, Trump's guy, and a truly lousy, vicious guy who first made his bones you know, as a McCarthyist guy during the Red
Senator
Scare.
Joseph McCarthy during the Red Scares, right?
So
Roy Cohn
there's
we're
an
talking about.
immediate continuity there. And Trump has famously been asking, since he first ran, where's my Roy Cohn?
Where's my Roy Cohn?
Meaning the guy who's going to smash through whatever, do whatever, contort the law, whatever, to get him where he needs to be. And again, like if you're starting to learn this history, you might learn about Roy Cohn as this magnificent villain from this period in the past. But I'd encourage you to remember that he was, again, somebody who was beloved by the journalist class, would show up in the gossip pages, and was an accepted character for a really long time. And my honest hope for your generation is that you can keep your cool and perspective in difficult times. And when characters like that come up who need to be whacked, that they get whacked once and they're put to the side and not allowed to return. My generation, which is just after Roy Cohn, we had Trumps and Curtis Sliwas and Al Sharptons and Rudy Giuliani's and a bunch of characters who maybe matched a moment, maybe did not, but should have been ushered off the stage long ago, who just do not go away. And they're not going to go away. They're on accord. It's up to y'all, is my point.
Harry making friends.
But in talking about, you know, journalists, I mean, we're always victims of our sources. You know, I mean, we can't do it without sources, and we can't, and then we have to say, are we going to burn our sources? I mean, that's an old journalism conundrum.
And I mean, like many of those characters are still influential, right? And they have a huge following, even more so now in the age of social media. Some of them are extremely deft at sending their message through those new channels, which is really impressive.
But it's also, I think that was a very good question, because the idea of an attempt to enforce, in this case a right wing, in that case a right wing conformity that you saw in the McCarthy era, and you see today, in you know, even to the extent that they kicked the Associated Press out of the press pool because they wouldn't call the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America, and they brought in some of the right wing, you know, online, slightly weird news organizations to have seats in the front row. I mean, there is an analogy here. I mean, I don't know who's, you know, maybe I'm...
At the end of the day, what's happening here is that there are some people who are extremely scared, but they could do something about it. And those are Republican Congress members. Many of them are, some of them are already saying out loud, hey, we are scared of speaking up. If they are scared of speaking up, how do you think we feel in academia or in other sectors of the economy in this country? I think it's really telling that you have members of the governing party going along with all this just because they don't want to be pummeled by attacks and threats sent over by the president and his people.
I mean, arguably, the worst excesses of the first Trump term were held at bay because some of the guardrails, meaning the media and the courts, held. You know, are the media, you know, the media is much more...
What's the media? What's the media?
Well,
today?
the media is a much weakened institution now. Yeah. I mean, I think that mainstream media, what does that even mean? Mainstream media did take on Donald Trump, and you didn't see the Jeff Bezos situation at the Washington Post, where he's trying to kind of control the message at the Washington Post, which is, you know, more than shocking. And the courts have, you know, even the Supreme Court. I mean, Amy Coney Barrett, who thought that she was going to be the one to save the republic, is the one who is not going along with the worst excesses that you see from the Clarence Thomases and the Samuel Alitos. So, I mean, the question that you're raising is, do the guardrails hold? Not only Republican council members, not only Republican Congress people, but the media, the courts, and of course, then do they comply with court orders, which is the ultimate constitutional crisis heading down the pike. I mean, you're a Washington.
Yeah, well, the courts don't have any power to enforce, really. So it's really the respect of the American people and our institutions for the court's decisions, even if we disagree with them. So it's they are coming out with decisions that he's absolutely ignoring, which I have never seen in my life. And it's just breaking new ground. You have a lot of material to write about in your paper. I tell you, it's every day it's something new that has never happened before.
Do the guardrail.
I think that also we shouldn't forget that we are in this situation right now because mistakes were made. I don't think we are we're all in some sort guilty of the situation we're in today. I don't think the media was perfect, the mainstream media, and maybe that led to American voters and American society not to trust the mainstream media. Maybe Democrats made some mistakes in the past administration, right? And not only in this country, because what we are seeing here in the U.S. is happening also all over the world. So this is not just like the U.S. or Donald Trump. Donald Trump is who he is also thanks to the media.
Hungary and Turkey and El Salvador.
Yes, Germany.
And, right.
Yeah, in France. And so you have these cycles in history, and I guess we are in the middle of one of them. However, I think we need to be honest with the public, and we also need to admit some guilt, and we have to show a wider perspective, because if we keep saying like it's all Donald Trump's fault, or Donald Trump is crazy, or we are missing a lot of different variables in that equation that I think explain a little better what's happening today here and all over the world.
So if I can just interject for a second, I want to get back to the young woman's question. What could Generation Z do here? And you mentioned we were in cycles, right? The 50s were followed by the 60s, before my time, but it was followed by massive protest around the condition of the country when those kids met it. I would argue that's what Gen Z needs to do. As you see the older leaders, congressmen, media, shrinking back, Gen Z has to step forward and say, listen, this is unacceptable. And we don't care if our older leaders are stepping up, we're going to step up. To then mimic cycles in history, 50s were followed by the 60s. Hopefully Gen Z can step up like what happened in the 60s and say enough is enough. And we as young people will then step up if the older people don't.
Well, there seems to be a demonstration every other day. I used to try to go to every one I was notified, but I mean, they're every day, every weekend, and they're pocket demonstrations so that they can't hit them back. We're having, instead of big demonstrations, they'll give you 24 hours notice. Maybe you just get it in the morning. Hey, show up over here. Let's speak out. So it's all over the city and all over the country, and it's really the young people that are leading it. David Brooks wrote a great article about the need for all of us to step up and demonstrate and speak out, and we can do that. And the young people have been leading us in that, and very well.
Yes, your name and your campus, please.
Yes, hi, I'm Louisa Opdyke, and I attend School of Labor and Urban Studies.
No, speak up.
Oh, urban studies. I just would like to return to that question about what New York City can do with less, especially around low-income housing. I think possibly a recession might be a good time to invest in low-income housing, as in cheaper materials, cheaper land, and I assume I'm speaking to you. Possibly looking into refinancing, mixed income housing, all that stuff. I mean, New York is sitting on probably the highest land values possibly in the world, and a lot of that is not capitalized with property taxes and tax-exempt status. People like Columbia, churches, whatever. There's a lot of money out there.
So let me, I think what she's asking is every crisis could be an opportunity.
Yeah.
It sure is. It sure is. Bloomberg started down this path, which was if we don't have more money, lower the regulations that developers have to develop. Make it easier for developers to develop. So that's one non-monetary way that we can develop smarter. We have to just be smarter. City of Yes is a step in the right direction, right?
What the city of Yes is it basically gave you can build 20% more units if you make them affordable.
Right.
Right.
Indeed, indeed. So, land can hold a 5-story building or it can hold a 20-story building. It's the same plot of land. And so if you allow land to be more dense specifically for affordable housing, you can then create more affordable housing. I think City of Yes should have gone further. We have maybe a second.
But can you do that absent the myriad levels of support of vouchers and the tax exempt status of funds? Are they taking that seed corn away just as what you're talking about is open?
They changed zoning too and made many more areas available.
Right.
And I think when you talk about housing, it's not just what you build, it's what you hold on to.
That too.
And as a former city council member and a former member of Congress, I spent a great deal of time holding on to public housing, supporting it, holding on to affordable housing as they tried to destroy it. So that's another way to look at it. But housing is certainly, I'd say, the major problem of the city. And
affordability is, yes.
Affordability and housing spaces, really.
Right.
If you look at, and you've got to give Mayor Adams a lot of credit for the City of Yes. I can remember working on various housing proposals and increasing more affordable units that didn't pass, and they were far less visionary than the City of Yes. That was a major accomplishment. Right. And we should take, you should grab it and take that 20% and help us build more housing.
But it was a step. You have a NIMBY phenomenon in New York City, not in my backyard, where a lot of people who support affordable housing just don't want it on the vacant land near where they live.
It'd be really cool if we could just have 6-story buildings, like walk-up heights, everywhere. And there's lots and lots of neighborhoods that have fought from and protected themselves against that. My mom, I love you, Mom, I'm sorry. She's very fiercely defending of the part of Brooklyn she lives in, where much of it, there's beautiful Victorian houses, and it's real different. It's where Maya Wiley lives. She said she's from Flatbush. It's a unique corner of Flatbush. And there's some 6-story buildings there. There's one that Donald Trump's father owned that had a swimming pool in the back. It was a rental building, so I was always trying to make friends there. But there's a ton that can happen. City of Yes is really a significant accomplishment. And it is not all the way there. And also because we're in an election, all the other candidates are sort of treating it that way. Like, that was okay, but we need more. It was a big thing to pass. That's not easy. There are a lot of restrictions on what can get built where. A lot of people who live places who are understandably very protective of them. I'm sorry for those people. We need more housing, and if we can make that simple and easy, because we're not building our own housing anymore. The federal government isn't. We can't keep the mold and the lead paint, can't get the lead paint out of our NYCHA buildings, right? Like, the federal government paid for those. When we're talking about housing here and how much more is going to get built, we're actually talking about private housing and like the level of subsidy to make that happen. And so if a socialist person, hypothetically like a young, appealing mayoral candidate, is like, let's just build our own housing. In principle, I love that. This is billions and billions of dollars. The labor costs are incredibly high. And there's no illegal immigrant subcontract or anywhere else in the way he's describing this. It's all union labor. Like, I love it. I just need to understand where those billions are actually coming from. And that gets hard to take seriously. So these are difficult choices, but it's really getting to a crisis point in New York. It's crazy expensive here.
I'm going to take one more question here, but I grew up in Linden houses in East New York, and when I came back to Newsday to cover Brooklyn, I realized it was the 30th anniversary of the project from when we moved in, so I went back to look at it, and in 1957, NYCHA alone opened 15,000 units with federal support. Mm-hmm. By the time Ronald Reagan comes in the 80s, it's 500 units a year, and it's never recovered. So, I mean, I'm not sure that the federal commitment to actually building housing is ever coming back. Yes, let's get one more question in.
This question could go for anybody, really, but I wanted to know, like, as we know, like, Trump has been kind of neglecting what the judicial branch has been saying. So what do you think what type of precedent does that set for the future presidents that are coming about, and like how should we be scared or not, I guess is the question.
Well, we're not lawyers. We just play one on TV. But the precedent. You had Trump 1 followed by Joe Biden, who was, if nothing else, an assiduous respecter of tradition and process, and in a way that Trump was not, which was a remarkably refreshing. I mean, he also ran an economy that saw very low unemployment. I mean, there was a lot of normal things that happened that are not happening anymore. But does the Trump phenomenon presage a change, or will this be an aberration? I mean, how do you answer this question? I don't know.
We'll see.
I know. I mean, that's right.
I think it ultimately comes down to elections, and whether or not the midterm elections are very important. That's going to be a barometer of where the country is, and the person, it's who gets the most votes is going to win. So, and it's everybody says, how do you influence these Republican Congress members? They're listening to their constituents. Right. That's how they get elected.
That's right.
If they are elected in districts that voted for President Trump, so it comes down to the people. It comes down to the democracy, and it comes down ultimately to an election. I remember my 8th grade teacher saying, in America, we don't have revolutions. We shoot at the ballot box. And you can see dramatic changes that take place in our country just at the ballot box. We just saw that. We saw a dramatic change. Do the people, are they supporting what's happening? They voted for it. He's doing exactly what he said he was going to do.
Which is what's really shocking to people. Let's come back, because we have about 4 minutes left. We do have a mayoral race. We have 51 city council members are up. We have a bunch of borough presidents are up. A couple of district attorneys are up. It's very hard to cut through the noise to get the kind of attention that these candidates deserve, frankly. If they're putting themselves up to run, they deserve to be heard, but it's hard to hear them.
Mm-hmm. Can I plug our interviews, actually? Because the New York editorial board that Harry and I are members of, we're having breakfast with all the mayoral candidates. We're having lengthy conversations. The transcripts can be found on Substack. Nice. Substack, New York editorial board. And many of those candidates have really interesting positions, policy positions. Like Harry said, some of them maybe are not offering details on how they're going to pay for those interesting proposals. One thing that I would say, and I'll give it back to Harry, is that I think we're going to have a very interesting mayoral campaign, way more than people expect because of Andrew Cuomo being so popular. I think we're going to have a real fight, not only for the Democratic primary, but also in the general election.
Good point.
So Andrew Cuomo has not shown up. His aide, Melissa DeRosa, calls the other candidates the dwarves. The dwarves have all shown up, and those dwarves are showing up at forums. They're offering pretty substantial plans, and they have to back up a lot of what they're saying. So Zoran Mamdani, the socialist, I took a little poke at before, he says, here's I'm going to tax and pay for everything I'm doing. I don't think it's credible, but he's said it, and I can judge it. It's frustrating to have front runners who aren't doing that. I actually blame Democrats here, and fundamentally the left. Like, we have a ridiculous system of elections in the city. Usually it's the June primary, which is ranked choice, that actually matters, right? But then there's a winner-take-all general election, which could be very competitive and complicated this year, with who's in it and two centrists competing for the same space and maybe opening up someone on the left or the right to sneak through with 32% or whatever. This is not a super healthy way to run a city. So Eric Adams, who I think is corrupt and has been a bad mayor, I've written this, and it was also not shown up yet to the editorial board, I'll note, sure. Right? He has a charter reform thing right now, and the reason he has one is to block the city council from having one. So his motives are not pure. But having done this previously, he put reasonably honest people on.
He's not the only mayor who's done that.
No,
right.
No, and Trump is not the only president to test courts or norms. He's doing it in more brutal and very dramatic ways. And as the Congresswoman said, stay tuned. We're going to see which walls hold, which ones burst, and where that leaves us. And this is why we have elections. But at moments of high intensity like this, it's very helpful to remember that these same pressures and questions and tactics are happening all the time and continuously in our life. Like, every president has a gigantic nuclear arsenal, and with a stroke of a pen can make profound changes to the world. And it's also important to remember most people don't care about any of this, and they don't really care that much about the Constitution, even if it helps sell New York Times subscriptions, sometimes cynically when a Trump or any Republican is there. They're just like, how much do my eggs cost? Do I feel safe? Like real, ordinary, boring stuff. Am I happy with my kid's school? And do I think I'm doing better than my parents were? It doesn't even matter how good or bad you're starting off. If you feel optimistic, it's easier to sell people. And going back very quickly to Trump erasing all this history, what's enabling him to do that, what's giving him whatever moral authority, is simply that Make America Great Again is nonsense. But it starts off with the suggestion, at least, of a positive thing. And Democrats, and in New York and nationally, I think for a long time, started offering such a critical message and sort of confused important counterpunching, like Howard Zinn. Or Chomsky, who, by the way, would get this with, like, you don't want the colleges getting all this money from the federal government as part of the military-industrial complex. It sounds positive. And Democrats need to make sure that they're messaging, hey, this is a flawed place, and we have debts that we owe and things we need to make right. But fundamentally, here's our vision for a better, more inclusive, yes, absolutely more diverse future that's solid and appealing, and not just a litany of original sins, science and complaints proving it. That is simply not a winning message, and I hope they get there so we don't end up here again.
We're about out of time, and I always make deadline. You all understand that. Thank you all. We'll see you next time on CUNY Forum. Thank you.